I see something. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
I'm gonna go let that dog in because she's driving me nuts.
Hi, Glenn.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Good. How are you tonight?
Good, good, good.
Curtis, Glenn, Steve.
Hey, Kevin. Good evening, all.
Glenn? Sarah, you might also want to introduce Glenn as our board chair.
Excellent. Absolutely. Thanks for joining, Glenn.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course.
Curtis, you got the Zoom figured out? Curtis, can you hear me?
They had it up and running a few minutes ago.
Okay, good.
Speaking some things right now.
So Sarah, this will be the final one of this calendar year, and then you'll pick up again after convention?
Yes. And Kevin, that's one of the things I was planning on calling you tomorrow to see if you had some suggestions for topics. I've already got Clint Epps lined up for March.
Okay. I'll give that some thought. I should be around tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. And just while killing time here, Steve, I have my intro, a shout out to you and Sarah, because it was around this time last year, Steve Kilpatrick, Sarah Dewey, and I had a late season cow tag and we were driving back and I'm like, so what should we do for 22, Steve and Sarah? What are some ideas for, programming? And the two of them brainstormed this and here we are.
So how many will this make in this calendar year?
Oh, good question. I've got to look that up. At least 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Sarah, I got on the National Bighorn Sheep website, and then when I clicked on this presentation, it went back to Francis Cassier's presentation. So you might have your office people double check that. So I was going to just get into it via the website rather than the email.
Yep.
And again, was kind of fumbling around. I'm sure part of it could be me, but when I clicked on Curtis King, I got Francis Cassier's last year's presentation.
Oh, that's, let me fix that. I could probably fix that right now. Thank you.
But anyway, check it out. And yeah, it could be me and my ineptness.
When I click here for the Zoom link, it launches Zoom. I don't know what you clicked on, Steve. Because it works for me.
Okay, I'll try it again.
Yeah.
We can move ahead with what we got. We'll deal with that later. Thank
Okay.
you.
No, thank you for bringing that up.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. I think we're gonna be in good shape here.
All right,
Hey,
good.
Curtis.
So my lovely assistant is printing a few more pages for me, and I think what I'm gonna have to do is read these so that when the PowerPoint's up, you guys can see what's going on, but some of it won't be blocked, so I can share that with you.
Okay.
I just need to know how to get it started.
Is this your screen?
Recording in progress.
Taffy, if I could ask you to just mute yourself, I think that for some reason I can't mute you, but. Hi, David. Curtis, you are muted.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm just gonna go back to mute until you're ready to start. Are we almost there?
Yep. We'll give it 2 minutes, maybe one over just to see people trickle in. Do you want to share your screen right now, or do you want to like cue that?
I can go ahead and put the screen up and start sharing, and I don't think you guys need to look at me until we're done with that, so.
Yeah. Whatever works. If you're comfortable, then we'll just wait till after the intro.
Yeah. Can you see that now?
Yes. And I'm just going to ask as people come on in, if you would put your email address in the chat box. So this way we can make sure that you're on our listserv so you can see a recording to this and similar programs in the future. We'll get you on our mailing list so you guys get the updates about programs we're having around similar topics. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
How do you not do that?
All right, so we're at 6 o'clock. I'll give it one more minute, Curtis, just as folks come on in, and then we'll get started.
You bet. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely, our pleasure. And if you are on the call, I just ask that you please mute yourself. I'll try my best to mute you guys manually, but just to keep the background noise to a minimum. Meredith, for some reason, I can't mute you, Meredith. That's okay if you just stay quiet. And as again, we wait for people to trickle in, I'll just let everybody know that this will be recorded. We typically send out an email with the recording. The email is also available on our website in the repository section. All right, so in the interest of time, I will start my introduction. Welcome, everybody. My name is Sarah Bridge. I'm the Executive Director of the National Bighorn Sheep Center located in DuBois, Wyoming. Tonight, we're very excited to host this webinar on Packgoats. This is the last and our first Wild Sheep webinar series. I'd like to thank Steve Kilpatrick on our board of directors and Sarah Dewey for helping to create the vision for this. It's been a hit and I'm looking forward to 2023. Tonight, we're hosting Curtis King, president of the North American Packgoat Association. Curtis is here tonight to make the case for the use of Packgoats in wild sheep habitat. Thank you, Curtis. As we know, domestic goats and domestic sheep carry Mycoplasma ovinemoniae, MOB. This is a bacterial species commonly found in the nasal cavity and sinuses of apparently healthy domestic sheep and goats. We know that it's transmitted to wild sheep and goats through nose-to-nose contact, sometimes aerosol and droplet transmission. We know that MOV has been associated with large all-age die-offs in sheep due to pneumonia. Tonight, Curtis will present his take on the appropriate use of Packgoats in sheep habitat. Tonight, we're joined by three individuals from the Wild Sheep Foundation to help answer questions and add to this discussion. I'd like to introduce Dr. Peregrine Wolf. Her veterinarian career spans over 30 years. She currently serves as the executive manager of the Wildlife Disease Association after her retirement as the state of Nevada's wildlife veterinarian. She was the Wild Sheep Foundation's board chair in 2020 and was reelected for a second term in 21. Thank you, Dr. Perry, for joining this evening. Second is Kevin Hurley. Kevin, thank you for inviting Curtis to present this webinar tonight. Kevin is Wild Sheep Foundation's Vice President of Conservation. He has over 45 years of experience as a wildlife biologist with wild sheep. He spent 3 decades in our home state of Wyoming as a wildlife biologist. Thanks again, Kevin. And last but not least is Glenn Landris, who's Wild Sheep Foundation's current board chair. And thank you so much for joining us this evening, Glenn. So with that, I'll kick it off to Curtis. I'll ask that we please hold questions to the end. This will be recorded, and we'll take it from there. It's all
Sarah,
yours.
did you want me to do an intro before Curtis or? whatever?
Kevin, if you absolutely say a few words, and then we'll let Curtis take the floor.
Yeah, okay. It was probably back in August. Curtis and I were talking, and we somehow came on this webinar series that the Sheep Center has been doing. And so it's obviously an issue of great interest to wild sheep folks. And so it seemed like a worthwhile topic. Curtis and I talked about when he might be able to present, and hunting season wasn't the best. And so here we are in December. But I suppose I met Curtis 7-8 years ago. You know, we were dealing with this issue on the Shoshone National Forest and their plan revision. The Shoshone, of course, has more wild sheep on it than any national forest in the system. So we go back a long ways. We don't know each other super well, but we're respectful and courteous to each other. We don't always see eye to eye, but that's okay. It's okay to have a grown-up conversation. And so this seemed like a topic that the Sheep Center's constituents might benefit from hearing and having the chance to visit with Curtis and maybe some of his folks. So Curtis, thank you for carving time out of your schedule to put this together.
Absolutely. Have you got a good signal? I think I'm still unmuted. Okay, good. Yeah, Sarah and everyone that's on board tonight, thank you for letting us come out and visit with you and give this presentation. For those of you that are out there that don't know me, my name is Curtis King. I am an Eastern Washington resident. I have been for my entire life. I've been a police officer for 33 years. That's what I do professionally. I train and use pack goats for hunting and fishing and backpacking, and I have done that for about 12 years now. And it's just been an absolute game changer for me in the way I use goats in the backcountry to carry my equipment. I've got a throat lozenge in my mouth, and I'm going to drink this tea because I work in a germ factory. I've got a little bit of a cold, but I think I'm going to be able to get through this no problem. So forgive me if you see me drinking my hot tea there. This presentation will probably take about, I think I can probably burn through this thing in about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a pretty good time frame for questions and answers. And I think that's where we wanted to go, I believe, Sarah. So feel free to stop me if I'm going too long or we need to, pause. So let me just start with this PowerPoint and we'll buzz right through this thing and get back to the good stuff. So this first slide is the history of NAPCA, and I hope you can see the whole thing. Can everybody see the screen?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, we're very good. Okay. So NAPCA is the premier organization for advocating for goat packing, responsible pack goat use, and keeping public lands open to the use of pack goats. Let me just back up just 20 seconds. So I took over as the North American Packgoat Association's president six years ago. It was about 2015. And we've been down a long road. We've come a long ways. We've done a lot of exciting things towards education and awareness. And we'll touch on some of those highlights as we go through this. But continuing on, goat packing came into existence in about 1972 when a gentleman by the name of John Mindzinski first used pack goats to carry his gear while studying bighorn sheep in the Wind River Range on the Shoshone National Forest. Just a real quick history on John. He's the author of The Pack Goat, copyright 1995, I believe it is. If you're interested in that book, it's available. John was issued horses by the Forest Service. They couldn't go where he needed to go to follow his bighorn sheep, to do his monitoring. He gave the horses back to the Forest Service and said, I can't use these anymore. They can't help me. And as he's carrying a 90-pound pack out of the mountains one night, he falls down in a stream and he picks the pack up and he continues on down the mountain towards his pickup truck. And he has this vision in his head about Weather Vane, a goat that he has back at the ranch. And he thought, you know, what would happen if I got some kind of a saddle established to put on his back, and maybe he could help me carry some of this weight. And he's literally laughing as he's walking down the hill thinking about this, because he thought, you know what, it just might work. And he pioneers a saddle, and the rest is history. And out of that experience in the Western United States, as we know it, the Packgoat was born. NAPCA was the brainchild of George Bogdan, Mike Silverman, and Carolyn Eddy. George Bogdan and Carolyn Eddy have since deceased. They were very instrumental in starting this organization back in the early 90s. It was organized after the Sawtooth National Forest attempted to regulate goat packing. A national organization would be necessary to help with these issues nationwide, as goat packers otherwise had no voice in public land use management. Much of the history of the North American Packgoat Association is archived in the Goat Tracks magazine, which was started by Ellen McMaster and John Mindzinski back in the fall of 1995. What's the purpose and objectives of NAPCA? North American Packgoat Association is an organization established specifically for promoting packing with goats. This organization seeks to further the pursuit of goat packing by sharing the knowledge, ideas, and experiences of its members, by promoting the use of pack goats to the public as a means of low-impact wilderness transportation recreation. NAPCA's mission statement. Our mission statement is to promote the common sense use and enjoyment of pack goats, to improve, mentor, and encourage competency in the practice of goat packing among interested persons, to provide communication among and to disseminate information to interested users, to promote scientific study of the capron species, their care, welfare, and training, to urge recognition of goat packing as a low-impact stock alternative, and to establish traditions which will aid, perpetrate, and further the welfare of goat packing and the goats that it employs. So what do pack goats do? Well, pack goats carry your loads in varied terrain, crossing deadfall, boulders, rivers, all types of weather. They have no boundaries. Are you seeing something in the middle of the screen there that just popped up?
It looks fine to me.
Okay. Yeah, it's some kind of an advertisement thing in there that popped up. I'll see if it disappears.
Okay.
Pack goats never complain. They follow faithfully and tread lightly on the land. Pack goats are man's other best friend, loyal, loving, great companions on the trail. I can tell you from my experience, goats can carry a pack through snow up to their bellies. If a deer or an elk can walk through it, goats can go through it with the pack on. They can cross water up to their bellies with a 50-pound pack on. They will not lose their balance, and they can traverse rivers and streams. I typically gauge a river or stream with my knee. If the water's over my knee, I'm not going to take my guys through it. But if I can walk across, they can go across. So they're really a unique animal in the fact of their versatility to navigate the backcountry. Vision statement. The North American Packgoat Association is dedicated to being the most respected and influential organization in promoting the preservation, education, and training in the use of pack goats in North America. We will accomplish this vision by looking to best available science while fostering a philosophy and demonstration of pack goats practices and leave no trace ethics. NAPCA will strive to collaborate and work closely with public land managers, government agencies, and other wildlife organizations to ensure and allow the safe use of pack goats on public lands. NAPCA will use best available science as a guide in which to measure and develop our best management practices that address wildlife and other resource concerns. NAPCA will educate, encourage, and solicit active participation in the wise use of pack goats by networking through our NAPCA website, our annual conference, seminars, and various social media such as our Facebook sites. NAPCO will continue to be good stewards of the land by actively participating in land use planning wherever goat packing is concerned. NAPCO will respect and comply with local land use policy and regulations wherever pack goats are used, and will encourage other goat users to do the same. Where is NAPCO today? Well, NAPCO currently has approximately 300 members, and I'm just going to pause there for a second and ask you to look at that.
Where's some of those?
I think that there's a little bit of a misconception out there that this organization has thousands of people in it, and it doesn't. We currently have 300 active members in the lower 48 states and in Alaska, and less than 1/3 of that number actually uses pack goats where bighorn sheep might be present. Per the 2016 Packgoat study by Dr. Margaret Highland, only 19 Packgoat users of the 83 premises that were visited during that study reported having used Packgoats within 15 air miles of bighorn sheep habitat. NAPCO members are outdoor recreationalists, hunters, backpackers, researchers, anglers, photographers, and we're seeing a much increased use in families and senior citizens. The older people they have a harder time carrying a backpack, and this goat has just been absolutely turnkey for them to be able to continue to access the backcountry, especially if they have knee injuries, hip injuries, back injuries, and so on. We're seeing a lot of increase in use amongst the bow hunting community. The archery guys are doing backflips over these pack goats. They love the early season stuff where they can hunt the high country mule deer and the elk bugling season, and they've just had great success in getting their equipment in and getting their game out using goats. So the hunting community has really jumped in to the pack goat community. Bear hunters, especially in Washington, we have a lot of bear hunters that are using the goats to carry their bears out in Oregon and Washington and in Idaho. Moving right along, NAPCO uses our website, our annual rendezvous, and social media to educate the public and goat packers about the proper use of pack goats in the backcountry, on the trail, and in the community. NAPCO is currently working extremely hard to educate goat packers in the use of best management practices, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here. NAPCO believes in a conservation-minded, proactive approach to interactions with wildlife. Education and awareness is the key to accomplishing this. I wanted to talk with you a little bit about our best management practice cards that we have. I wish I could have mailed some of those to you so you'd had them, and then you'd see exactly what I'm talking about. When I go back to my screen, I'll try to show you this. We have a laminated card with all of our best management practices on it. It looks about the size of a driver's license. It has our 5 best practices on it, front and back. And we have given those things out like candy at all of our conferences. We give them to our breeders. So all of our pack goat breeders are giving those to people that are coming and purchasing goats from them to be used for pack goats. So I can't even tell you how many. We've produced thousands of these things, and we've given them out for quite a few years now. And it's been a great tool to reach our community on these BMPs, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. Here, going to the next slide. Packgoats allow senior citizens and families with children to travel further into the field. Both young and old can benefit from being able to enjoy the great outdoors. They truly are just a remarkable animal, and just such a companion on the trail and in camp. Packgoats carry your gear to hunting camp, and they can carry both your gear and the meat from harvesting an animal back out for you when you're done with your hunting. One of the unique things about packgoats is that these animals are not afraid. They don't have to be sensitized to an animal that's being packed out, like a mule or a llama or a horse that need to be sensitized to a dead animal. Goats could care less. They don't know they're goats. They're just there to help you. And when you get your critter down, you can cut them up, bone them out, and put them right into their meat panniers, and away you go. They'll stand there and watch you clean an animal. It doesn't bother them one bit. So that's a very unique trait that they have. Another real exciting thing that I like to share about Packgoats is their bondedness to their owners, especially in the backcountry during a hunting scenario. These goats, if you shoot a muzzle loader or a rifle around them or a handgun, they will not run off. They will startle a little bit until if they've been sensitized to it, like mine have. I shoot shotguns over mine all the time. Doesn't bother them a bit. Muzzle loaders, same thing. They don't care. They don't run off and they don't run back all the way to the truck 10 miles back to the trailhead, and then you have to go looking for them with your equipment. They might run 15-20 yards and stand there and look at you like, well, why are you making all that noise? And then it's all over with, and they're fine. So from a hunting standpoint, this has just been an absolute gem of a pack animal to use. They just will not leave you, and that's a beautiful thing. So what has NABCA done to benefit wildlife? NABCA has developed the best management practices and are actively educating the packgoat community on the importance of their use. And I want to stop there for just a second and talk to you a little bit about the interaction that we did have with the Wild Sheep Foundation in developing these best management practices. NABCA was genuinely concerned about what it is we needed to be doing with these goats so that everyone else that was monitoring this was going to be comfortable with this. And because we train goats and use goats, this is what we do. We have been able to come up with some really simple ground rules, these best management practices that have been very effective. And I further on in our discussion, we may hear some questions and answers from folks that say, well, Curtis, best management practices don't work. Well, I'm going to argue with you that they do work. They work just fine, and they work just fine if it's done correctly and it's done responsibly. We'll talk more about some of those things that might come up later on. NABCA members and the packgoat community actively participated in a critical packgoat study with Dr. Margaret Hyland. We had all of our goats tested, and the results of that study were very positive. NABCA has established the Carolyn Eddy Memorial Research Fund, which will be used to help fund wildlife research. NABCA currently has launched a urinary calculi study to find solutions and potentially a cure for urinary calculi. Now, this is probably not an important topic for this audience, but you should know that we have some members that have indulged in this very deeply. Chris Gifford, Margaret Scott, Teresa Mercer, Dr. Heller, the University of Davis is the lead doctor on this study, and Dr. Margaret Hyland is also assisting with this study. And our hopes is that, and this study may go on for years, that at some point we will come up or maybe possibly find solutions for urinary calculi. Goats can get stones in their urethra if they get too much phosphorus or too much calculi in their diet. Chris Gifford is convinced that it's the water that's causing most of our issues, and I think he's spot on. If you've got too much phosphorus in the water, they can collect stones in their urethra. If they cannot pass those stones, they get blocked, and they're basically a dead man walking. If you don't take them to a veterinarian and do an emergency surgery, you're pretty much going to have to put them down because they will not survive, and their bladder will burst and they just die. So we're working on trying to figure out how to make life better for our wethers in the future by working on that study. Moving right along, NABCA has established 2 Facebook pages, the North American Packgoat Association, Hiking with Packgoats to help, and our other one is we have an interaction group, Hiking with Packgoats, to help disseminate information and educate interested parties. I believe it was 2016. The Packgoat Association donated $1,000 to fund research by the Bighorn Sheep Restoration Group. I believe that was your group there in Wyoming. And I want to say that Ron Smith was our contact on that. And we donated some funds to help with some things going on down there. And we want to continue to do that. We have a research fund, and we've got a pretty good amount of money in there that we've been collecting, and we're always looking for better ways to use it and things that we can use it towards research. And that's that Carolyn Eddy Memorial Research Fund that I talked about earlier. NABCA joined the Wild Sheep Foundation in 2016 to better understand and educate our members on the conservation issues and to begin working towards a partnership with the Wild Sheep Foundation and the Wild Sheep working groups. A collaborative effort. Well, what is a collaborative effort between NABCA and the Wild Sheep Foundation and Wild Sheep working groups look like? Well, I think it's just all of these things that we've been talking about. It's getting involved. It's being involved in those meetings. It's putting our money where our mouth is. It's stepping up and being responsible for our goats and doing everything that we can do to be responsible with them, and working with these groups on any topic or issue that might come up, whether that be a land use issue or disease transmission concerns. Is there strength in numbers? Yes, I believe there is. Is there wisdom in education and awareness? I will leave this planet being thoroughly convinced that education and awareness is the most key component to this successful goat packing. I've shared this passion with other people. I've had people laugh at me about this, and I'm okay with that. But I'm thoroughly convinced that this is the absolute key to helping this issue be successful. And that's the education and awareness of a user group. Are there benefits? Are there benefits for these organizations working together? I believe that is an absolute yes. Two minds are better than one, and I think that if we come together, you know, I know Glenn is on the air tonight, and he's out there and listening. I had a very good conversation with Glenn Landers one time over the phone. It was in the morning. I was at work, and we were talking, and I was kind of letting him know some of the things that were going on with our Packgoat group. And he said, Curtis, if there was ever a day that we could all sit down and agree on the science, I think that we could make an enormous step forward. And that's a perfect example of what I mean by collaboration. You know, and will that day ever come? I don't know. I hope that it will, but I think that's a good step forward. By working together to establish an understanding of what responsible goat packing is, will reduce fears and concerns. Responsible goat packing prevents potential contact with wildlife, which includes any chance of disease transmission. It ensures a strong future for both goat packing and wildlife populations for generations to come. If collaborative situations cannot be reached, NABCA recognizes that administrative appeals or legal changes may be necessary to resolve land use conflicts. Well, and that usually lies with the Forest Service. So next slide. What are packgoats used for, other than just the hunting and fishing? Well, they do a lot of other things. Packgoats are used for a variety of service projects. We do a service project every single year at our rendezvous conference. We contact the district ranger or the Forest Service manager on the site that we're going to be hosting our rendezvous at, and we come to them with open arms and we say, hey, look, we want to do a service project for you while we're there for 4 days. What can we do for you? Can we put up a sign? Can we mend a fence? Can we clear a trail? Do you have a bridge that needs to be built, or do you need something fixed, or you know? And they meet us with open arms. They bring us chainsaws, they bring us shovels, they bring us tools, and they're like, yeah, free labor. Here, we're going to put you guys to work. So we do a lot of those projects. Cleanups, carrying trash and debris. We've had all kinds of projects where people have done stuff at the ocean, in the backcountry, packing out garbage, carrying tools and chainsaws for trail maintenance projects. So the Packgoat is right here to help with a lot of that. Education and awareness. Educating the public on the proper use of packgoats where wildlife are present is the critical key to preventing the risk of disease transmission. The packgoat is not part of the commercial goat industry, and I want everybody to underline that. They are not part of the commercial goat industry. Packgoats are not out clearing brush, being bred for meat or dairy. Traditionally, packgoats are wethers, a castrated male, and users maintain fewer than 10 packgoats, which are kept on private property and separate from other livestock. I want to talk about that later on when we get into the Laura Hensey study. Separated from livestock. The Silver Bell study with 5,000 brush clearing goats, and the Laura Hensey study where we compare, goats that were being used that are on farms that are in the foothills of where bighorn sheep call home. And I want to talk a little bit more about her study where she goes out and visits farms. And if she visits 10 farms and 9 of those farms have both sheep and goats on the premises, well, there's probably a good probability that she might find more goats there that have sheep pneumonia than would not. Clearly, because they're being housed on the same property. Flip the coin over to the other side and look at the Maggie Highland study. She visits 83 different premises from 8 different Western states. And we find almost a 98% clearance rate on packgoats, MOVI-free. So separating the brush clearing goat from a packgoat, I think is something that folks really need to focus on and look at. Continued awareness. I'm sorry, backing up just a bit here. Back to the middle of the page here. There has never been a documented disease transmission incident that has occurred between a packgoat and bighorn sheep or mountain goat. The probability of this ever happening is extremely low and non-existent if the best management practices are followed. I have made many phone calls. I have talked with lots of people. I have read everything I can get my hands on. I have self-educated myself on this topic. And I cannot find a single trace of an incident where a packgoat has ever been responsible for transmitting a disease to any wildlife. If the packgoat is not the problem packgoat for wild sheep, and it never has been, what is the culprit? Well, I've read everything that our listeners have read, and I think that it's pretty fair to say that the wool sheep that carry this Mycoplasma pneumoniae are really the culprit. I think where the packgoat community has really gotten frustrated is that we've been lumped into that category with them, and I don't think that there was justification for that. I want to talk about that a little bit more here too as we move along. Continued education and awareness of disease transmission, annual health certificates for packgoats, combined with best management practices, will pilot a bulletproof plan for recreational goat packing for generations to come. So you should see a screen that says bulletproof goat packing. Well, what is bulletproof goat packing? Bulletproof goat packing is successfully traveling through the backcountry on public lands, having no contact with wildlife. This includes traversing mountain passes, boulder fields, and dense timber, crossing rivers and streams, and safely camping at night in remote areas with packgoats tethered or high-lined or low-lined. This includes complete control and supervision over packgoats while hunting, for doing photography or observing wildlife at all times. Not just a couple hours out of the day, but at all times. Bulletproof goat packing is a combination of goat husbandry, training, proper equipment, knowledge, and the understanding of a conservation-minded awareness of wildlife. The bulletproof goat packing thing starts when that goat is brought home at 2 weeks or 2 months of age, and that bonding process starts with the owner. That bottle feeding's taking place, and that goat gets imprinted on that owner, that alpha goat. And through the training and the goat husbandry and the proper equipment and the proper use of that equipment, we establish 100% control of that animal. I have never lost a pack goat, and I'm just going to knock on wood and tell you I'm never going to lose a pack goat. It's very difficult to do that, and really the biggest risk, and we'll come back down to this later, is at night when goats are high-lined or tethered and a predator or a cougar comes into your camp. That's where things can get interesting. And there's ways to overcome that. I want to talk about that too. Moving right along. You should see a screen, Packgoat husbandry. Not all goats are capable of becoming Packgoats. Physical and mental attributes are considered when choosing Packgoat prospects. I can go to a farm and look at 40 goats. I'm gonna bring 3 of them home because I know exactly what I'm looking for. Conformation, I'm looking for hawkiness, I'm looking for feet, I'm looking for attitude. And typically I like to use a crossbreed, a cross between an Alpine or an Oberhasli. But at the end of the day, I'll take those Alpines all day long. They are the pristine pack animal. The buckling is hand reared from the time it is brought home until the time it is 3 to 4 months old. This is the beginning or the intense bonding process that will last a lifetime. A bonded goat will follow you anywhere and will stay with you. A bonded goat will not leave you. and that's very true. They just won't. Establishing a personal relationship with your veterinarian is critical at this point in the process. The timing of castration or weathering and identifying the buckling by tattooing with the scrapie herd ID or legitimate tattoo takes place during the first 4 to 5 months of age. Training begins from the moment they arrive home and continues into about age 3. It takes about 3 years to get a goat ready for packing. I start packing goats at age 2. I start packing them. I start training them the day they come home. Continues to age 3 when they begin to pack. During this time period, the goat establishes a position in the herd. They learn to lead, follow, and load and tether. They clearly know their names and several basic commands. They recognize their goat packer as the alpha goat and the leader. They know up, they know back, they train very, very much like a dog. It's not difficult to train goats. It's consistency and repetition. The discipline is the spray bottle. It's their kryptonite. They don't like water. If you want to keep them out of your camp, away from your food, while they're grousing and grazing, while they're doing their thing, you just get that spray bottle out and they'll stay right there. They will never let you out of their sight. They may graze 25, 30, 40 yards away from your camp. They're constantly looking up to see where you're at. And if the alpha goat can see you and everybody can see him, they're going to be right there. And then you whistle at them and they're going to come right back over. And you may have to go catch ones that are ornery when it's time to put them down for the night and tether them up. But for the most part, they gather up pretty quickly. So Packgoat owners devote a tremendous amount of time, money, and emotional investment into their animals, which means there's a great incentive to closely monitor their health and their well-being.
Yes.
Bonding and training. Bonding and training begin the day you bring the little guys home. You should see in front of you, let me go back up just to one more. You should see in front of you a veterinarian inspection certificate. Goat husbandry continued here. The goat's lifelong relationship with your veterinarian is critical for health inspections, longevity, overall health, and obtaining import permits. This is an import permit that I received from my veterinarian, Dr. Matthew Fulwell. I have a personal relationship with that man. He comes out to my house every year. He puts his hands on my goats. He does an inspection on them. He checks them all out. And because I have that relationship with him and he inspects my animals so frequently, I can call him up and give him or send him an email and let him know, hey, I want to go backpacking next week. I'm going to the, over here to the Eagle Cap Wilderness in the Wallala Whitman National Forest, which is where this permit was established for. And I'm going to go backpacking for 10 days. And he'll fire that off to me in a zipper. I can open it up and print it. It stays on my person the entire time that I'm in the backcountry. Anybody comes along from the Forest Service or anyone else wants to see my paperwork, There it is. Here you go. So we'll talk about more about these as we get into the some stuff that took place in your neck of the woods here this last summer. Training and equipment. A bonded goat detests being left behind. They will do everything in their power to keep you in their sight. Just try to go out and use the restroom and you're going to have 5 goats staring at you because they're not going to leave you alone. Physical control is obtained with the proper use of leads, collars, halters, and tethering equipment. While traversing the backcountry, the lead pack goat or the alpha goat must have their collar, their halter, and their bell attached to their collar, and the lead available at all times. The reason we put that bell on the alpha goat is because everybody else in the crew wants to follow him. I heard Mark Warnke say something that was the best comparable that I can use. A string of pack goats is kind of like a football team. You got a quarterback, you got a couple wide receivers, you got some tight ends and some guards. Okay, and they're all just a little bit different sized and a little bit different structures, and they do have a pecking order. You just don't get to pick the pecking order; they pick it, and they pick where they walk on the trail. Who's going to be first? Who's going to be second? The quarterback or the lead guy, he's usually third or fourth because he just wants to keep everybody in sight and he doesn't want to be last.
Well, you can.
So that's kind of how that works. Where'd I leave off here? Physical traverse at all times. Tethering equipment must have sufficient tensile strength and length to accommodate your entire herd. There should be a pressic knot or a loop and a snap lead for each goat. At night, all goats will have a bell attached to their collars. This is in our best management practices. Bells will alert you if there is something, possibly a predator coming into your camp. Using these guidelines, complete control is obtained and there is no opportunity for physical contact to occur with wildlife. Contact with wildlife can only occur if a goat is chased off by a predator by not tethering, or if the goat becomes separated from the alpha goat, which is you. This could only occur from lack of supervision or control while on the trail or in camp. You should see a screen, populations and best available science. Bighorn sheep numbers in the Western United States have increased from fewer than 25,000 in the 1950s to today's population of more than 80,000. Goat packing came into existence in 1972 when John Meinzinski first used pack goats to carry his gear while studying bighorn sheep. How have pack goats affected sheep numbers? Have they ever been an equation in that issue? To date, NABCA is not aware of any documented scientific study or incident that has linked packgoats to any wild sheep die-offs. The Karen Rudolph study, Washington State University, in reference to the 94-95 Hell's Canyon bighorn die-off, points the finger at 2 abandoned feral goats, not packgoats. It was never scientifically concluded that this die-off was due to the contact with those feral goats. I have read that study. I have had others that are much more educated than I am read that study and write white papers on that study. And it is my understanding that Karen Rudolph's hypothesis of her study was that there was a possibility in her hypothesis that the 2 feral goats may have had something to do with the outbreak. That was never scientifically proven in any part of her study. Those 2 feral goats came out of Asotin, Washington. They escaped? No, they didn't escape. They were at the fair, at the county fair, 2 weeks prior to them being found. After the fair, probably the owner drove them out to the end of a road somewhere and let them go because they didn't want them back at their house anymore. And that's sad, but that's probably what happened. Well, we know that because those goats had tags on their ears and they were traced back to the fair. The results, the nasal swab results of those 2 feral goats is more than likely probably still on file at Washington State University. The 2004 silver bell herd incident. Almost 5,000 brush clearing goats were commingling with the silver bell herd for over 60 days. The only disease transmission was conjunctivitis. None of these goats were pack goats. I'm just going to talk for 1 minute on this silver bell study. I actually talked with John Heffelfinger. He's Arizona Department of Fish and Game. Very intelligent man. He writes a lot of articles for the Mule Deer Foundation. He's an author. He's a great biologist, and he's a very sharp guy. And back in 2004, he had quite the rodeo on his hands when he was highly and directly involved with this silver bell herd incident. Guy by the name of George Johnson has 5,000 brush clearing goats, which he purchases for a brush clearing program. He brings them down to his property near the Silver Bell Mountains, and he hires 6 cowboys to maintain control of all these goats. He doesn't vaccinate these goats. He doesn't worm these goats. He doesn't have a veterinarian inspect any of these goats, and he gets these goats from all over the place. Well, these cowboys, equipped with horses, four-wheelers, and Copenhagen can rings in their back pockets, quickly lose control of these 5,000 brush clearing goats, and they quickly find their way up onto the Silver Bell Mountains and are intermingling with bighorn sheep. And John comes along and finds this. He gets in contact with George Johnston, the owner, and he says, "Hey, we got a problem here." And he gives them the green light to start rounding things up. They quickly do that. They are given permission to actually shoot some of these goats because they can't capture them. And 60 days later, they finally get all of the brush clearing goats back into their allotment, separated from the bighorn sheep. The flies are probably active. A fly more than likely is the culprit for transmitting pink eye from probably one of those trash goats, those brush clearing goats, to the bighorn sheep. John and his team are very proactive in using the helicopters and they net and dart, and they put ointment in the eyes of these bighorn sheep that succumb to this pink eye. Unfortunately, some of those bighorn sheep died. I believe the number of bighorn sheep that died in that incident were 11 bighorns. None of those sheep died of anything else other than falling off cliffs from mortality. And they got a little too close to them with the helicopters, and some of those sheep got pushed off the mountain. That's unfortunate. And some of that information did not make it into the report. But the thing I want you to take away from that silver bell study, after 60 days of being on the hillside with those trash goats, not a single disease transmission was transmitted. So I think that's a very interesting study to look at. Dr. Besser's study showed, Tom put sheep and goats together in the same pen down here at Washington State University for 100 days. He tested all of those animals 10 times before he put them in the pen together. I believe there was seven sheep. Some of the ewes were pregnant, and 7 goats. And those animals spent the entire summer together, 100 days of sleeping, eating out of the same manger, drinking out of the same water trough for 100 days. And absolutely nothing takes place. Not a single disease transmission occurs. They're all healthy because they were all healthy when they went in there. Well, moving down to the 2016 Dr. Hyland study. We tested the packgoat community in NAPCA tested 572 packgoats from 83 different premises throughout the Western United States for MOVI. These test results were overwhelmingly negative for MOVI. We had almost a 98% clearance rate. Moving on to the next slide. And
Curtis, we are at 6:47 right
yeah,
now.
thank you for that. I'm about 2 minutes away from having the presentation done, and then we can move right on to the. Oh, my mouse is not cooperating here. Okay, moving on to the best management practices. The best management practice document is a living document which is open to editing and updating as needed. NAPCA has created these best management practices to establish responsible common sense guidelines for goat packing. They are not intended to be overly restrictive or to discourage pack goat use in any way or in any location. NAPCA will use best available science as a guide in which to measure and develop our best management practices to address wildlife and other resource concerns. And then I'll just go through these real quick. Our first best management practice, individually identifying your pack goats. We can talk, you can see some of that stuff on your screen, but it's basically the scrapie ID, your herd number. You can, you'll have your collar with your name on there, your phone number, and all of these goats will be identified from their scrapie ID number. Number 2 is control. All pack goats shall be under direct human supervision at all times. They shall be on leads and have leads attached to their collars and halters. In camp, all pack goats shall be in direct sight or tethered in some fashion, picketing, high lining, or low lining. All pack goats shall be tethered at night within 30 feet of their humans with bells attached to their collars. Number 3 is separation. Goat packers shall minimize all contact with wildlife. Okay, and we hit home real hard on that when we do our lecture training. The lost pack goat, you should see the next one. Is it up there? Yeah, the lost pack goat. So there's a list of things to do here, numbers to call if you actually lose a pack goat. We were pretty instrumentally involved in putting these together so that folks can call the right people and do the right things if they have a pack goat that gets lost. And leave no trace is the last one. If you can see that screen, I only want to boast about that photograph for 10 seconds. Those are my guys. That is the glacier lake outside just at the foot of the Eagle Cap Wilderness in the Wallala Whitman. I can tell you that I lost track of how many trout I caught in that lake. But that's just a perfect example of how those guys will just sit there and watch you fish all day long. They won't leave you. Can you only see the screen? Can you not see me at this point? I'm gonna see if I can minimize the screen.
I can see you.
You can, okay. Well, I'll just keep going then, so that I don't have to mess with anything here.
Okay.
So just wrapping this up, and I want to get to your questions and answers. So just a really fast recap. Where are we with the pack goat community in the West at this time? Well, we've established those best management practices. We have a continued ongoing education and awareness by using those cards, which we disseminate to everyone in the organization, to the breeders and to anyone that will take one. So even if you're not a NAPCA member, we hand those things out. We give them out at when we're doing pack goat judging, when we're doing putting on classes for the 4-H projects or the FFA projects. I know Taffy Mercer and myself have done seminars for the Dairy Goat Association down in Oregon, and we've given these out to everyone. NAPCA has established a youth pack goat handbook, which is online on our website, trying to educate our youth with pack goats and how to do this properly. Continued education and awareness through our website, our social media sites. We reach a lot of people through our Facebook, Hiking with Pack Goats, and NAPCA's discussion group, which includes a lot of our topics on training, goat husbandry, equipment, feeding, and health. And we're continuously putting out those best management practices to our membership. We've currently got about 300 members strong, and we're growing. The equipment in the pack goat community has advanced dramatically. Saddles, the high lining equipment, the tethering equipment has gotten. Can you still see me up there?
Yeah, we wanted
Okay,
to just close the PowerPoint. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That even better. And now I want to talk to you just real briefly about the most recent example of our last entry into the Shoshone National Forest by one of our members. His name is Dave Swiss, and Dave was a perfect example of what NAPCA is doing to strive to be right on track with doing this responsibly. Since the agreeable closure took place on the Shoshone National Forest, and just a quick history, We met with the Forest Service. We met with the Wild Sheep Foundation. We agreed to stay out of 6 primary areas in the northern winds. And they said, okay, fine, you can have the lower half. We didn't care about the upper half because that's where a lot of the grizzly bears were. And most of our people were using the goats in the lower half because they wanted to visit the chain lakes and do fishing. So only one person has applied for a permit to go into the Shoshone since that emergency closure started and since that settlement took place. And that's Dave Swiss. So he had his veterinarian come out to his property and get all of his nasal swabs. And he pulled four of his goats out of the 10 that he took. He pulled 4 of them and had his veterinarian send those swabs off to the laboratory.
No point.
I'm not sure if it was the Kansas State Fed Laboratory or the Waddle Lab, but I apologize because I just don't know which one he sent them to, but they were sent to a federally accredited lab. All the results were clearly, obviously negative for Moby. He applies for his permit with the Shoshone National Forest through your forest supervisor, Joe Flowers, and he's out of the Lander office. And their trip was going to take place from September 1st, Labor Day weekend, through about the 10th or 11th. He meets with Joe Flowers on the steps of the Forest Service office at 10 o'clock in the morning because Joe agreed to meet him there, even though it was not a business day, but they had to drive an hour out of their way to go see him because they had to get the permit. So when he arrives with the stock trailer, Joe comes out, he opens the door, he inspects all of his goats, he looks at the paperwork and makes sure all the ID tags and everything are on there. Everything's in order. The veterinarian paperwork is there. The test results are there. He issues him a stock permit. Off he goes into the woods. Now, the location that he went to was an area called Worthen Meadows, and I had that written down here somewhere. Worthen Meadows, and it was a lake. Lewis Lake Road in the Worthen Meadows trailhead. So they go 12 miles in. They have a wonderful, successful trip. They catch lots of fish. They don't lose any goats. Everything is fine. Everything is successful. They see no bighorn sheep on that on that entire trip. When they come back out, Dave does an after action report and he leaves a phone message with Joe Flowers at his voicemail, and he explains to him, hey, we made it out. No, we didn't lose any goats. Everything went fine. Just wanted to give you an after action report. We did not observe any bighorn sheep during the expedition. And I guess Joe never got back to him. So but he made the effort to do that. So one of the just real fast things I wanted to bring up was, you know, Dave was he's the first person to pilot or test those waters since this closure took place on the Shoshone. It cost him about $400 out of his own pocket to have the veterinarian come out, take those samples, send them to the laboratory, get it done, ship everything off to the laboratory, get the results back, and then he has to send all that off to the Shoshone National Forest to get his permit. I always cringe when it costs a lot of money to do things that should be fun in the first place. And I had entertained this and visited this idea in the past. I appreciate very much Steve Kilpatrick for allowing me to stay with him when I visited you folks a couple years ago at one of your sheep working groups. And I actually met with your president of the Wyoming sheep working group there, the wild sheep group. And I asked him, I says, do you guys not have any monies allotted for extra stuff for things like this? You know, and he said, Curtis, we've got an extra $3,000 a year that we can use for this particular kind of thing. And, you know, they didn't say no to the idea, but they didn't say yes either. And I'm just wondering if those kinds of things might be able to be revisited in the future. I know that when I brought that up with the group down in California, specifically for the Inyo and the Sequoia National Forest, they were very interested in that. They're like, yeah, we want to help you guys test your goats if you're going to use them in here, because clearly there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be done. There's a lot of science that hasn't been accomplished yet, and there's still so much we don't know. So, you know, those things might come up as questions and answers, but, you know, That pretty much wraps up my presentation. The only other things I just wanted to hit on, because it was on your bullet point flyer, was, well, what are the responsible steps, really, in closing, that NABCA has taken to ensure contact with wild sheep? Well, we hit on that in the PowerPoint. Our education and awareness training, our video instructional training that we've done. By the way, if anybody's taking notes or writing anything down, if you don't know about our instructional video training video that we did, it's on YouTube. You just type in North American Packgoat Association best management practices, and you'll see that goat logo pop up. Click on that. It's a 23-minute video, and it's been viewed a bazillion times by our users. So I know it's getting used. So this education and awareness thing is working. Our best management cards, and I'm going to hold this up because I see my screen pretty clear. Hopefully, can you guys see this? It's probably backwards, but it's two-sided. And if anybody wants one of these, I'll be more than happy to mail you one. I missed my last slide. My last slide on the presentation has my phone number and my email, but it's no longer up. So let me just give that to you verbally if anybody wants it. I know that a week later you'll go, you know, I want to call that guy and ask him a question. So if you're interested, it's Curtis King. My phone number is 509-539-0982. If you forget that, you can log into our NABCA. Well, I think you have to be a member to get phone numbers. So anyway, there it is. And I'll give it to anybody else that wants it. My email is out there, curtis.king66@yahoo.com. You know, I don't want to bore you with the demonstrations that we've done at the fairs with 4-H, with Packgoat judging. Those are some other things we've done as outreach to do education and awareness in the community. You folks need to know that these kids at the fairs, when they go to the fairs to show their sheep and goats, they know nothing about Mycoplasma obumoniae. And I know that because I've talked with them. And you will not go to a fair anywhere. You go to the fair and look how they're set up. Go to the sheep and goat barn, and how close are the sheep and goats at any fair that you've ever been to in any county, whether it's Asotin, Walla Walla County, Franklin County, your county right there in Wyoming, and go look at how they set up county fairs. They don't separate sheep and goats. And these kids know nothing about this disease transmission issue. And so we are really reaching out to these 4-H leaders and these FFA group leaders and saying, hey, you guys need to get on board with education and awareness about this Mycoplasma obumoniae that these sheep are carrying, because you're bringing it to the fair. It's getting spread to other sheep and goats. They're taking it back home. It goes to somebody else's farm, and so on and so on. And I'm not a biologist, folks. I'm just a cop. But do the math. How long does it take for that to spread if that's going on? Has anybody ever really looked at that? So I asked a lot of questions from a lot of folks, especially over in Asotin, and I got a lot of people nodding. And they said, you know what, you're right. These kids don't know anything about it. And most of the 4-H leaders don't know anything about it. So we have a lot of work to do in that aspect. I'm gonna pause right there. The only other thing I've been actively involved in is the participation in the Asotin County Conservation Sheep Working Group right down here in Asotin, Washington. We've been trying to closely work with them on their project for getting sheep and goats tested in that region, because they're so concerned about what's going on in the Hells Canyon unit down here on the Snake River. So I've been talking a lot. I'm going to drink some tea. And Sarah, if you can hear me, let's start doing the questions and answers thing. If I can't answer your question, I'll just tell you, or I'll help you try to find an answer. But I'll stop it from there and open it up to our next piece.
Thank you, Curtis. Yes, in interest of time, I think if people have questions, just jump on in, unmute yourself. And I guess we can let's stay until 7, plan for 30 minutes Q&A, just so people have time to ask their questions. So first question, anybody? First comment?
Yeah, I have a question. If the sheep or excuse me, if the goats are so dedicated to their alpha person, then how do you ever get out of their eyesight if you always have to be within 30 feet of them, which is what your guidelines are? They seem so very dedicated to the human in their midst.
You don't get out of their eyesight. You clearly don't. So just a couple of examples. I'll start with Mark Warnke with Packgoats.com. Mark Warnke out of Boise, Idaho, has probably taken goat packing to the absolute extreme. I thought John Mindzinski did some pretty wild stuff with goats, doing 18 miles a day with some of his goats. And I thought, wow, that's a marathon. And I've seen some of the places that that man has been with goats, and I've seen some of the terrain that he has crossed with goats, and it's just off the chart. It's just so athletic, marathon type goat packing. I'm a little bit more of a lazy goat packer. I fish and hunt in the Umatilla National Forest. I use my goats in the backcountry to carry most of my gear down there, and I'll spend 3 or 4 days fishing the Winnaha River system for bull trout. And I walk up and down the stream, and they just, if they can't see me, they walk into the water, and they'll walk down a little bit further and just get right back up on the bank, and they'll stand there and watch me fish. They won't let you out of your sight, and that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. The
But
hunting.
can you go into a tent? I mean,
if you don't close the door on your tent, your goat's going to be in your sleeping bag. I can tell you that that's going to happen.
Tent, so I'm just curious. You're hidden by the inside the tent, but they know you're in there, so
they know you're in there. They
Okay.
can hear you, they can smell you, and they know you're there because they never let you out of your sight.
Okay.
Back
Thank
to the BMPs. When we go down at night, there's 3 things you go down at night with. Watch our training video on YouTube. Mark goes over me and Mark go over this with a fine-tooth comb. You go down with your flashlight, your headlamp, your pistol, and bells on the collars, okay? So that you can, if bells are going off and bells are dingling, you need to get up and see what's going on. I've personally been attacked by cougars twice. I won both times. It's a little scary. It's a little startling. They're big. They are bulletproof, and they have no fear of humans. They could care less that you're there. They're there to eat something, and that's what they're trying to do. So you want to put those bells on there. That'll alert you that something's going on. You get up, you shine your light out there, see what's going on. And the one time I had a cat come right into my camp, and I shot it. Well, and game over. And that was the end of that scenario. We had another gentleman just recently had the same scenario come in. The cat actually jumped right on top of his goat, and he went out and shot the cat, and it ran 100 yards down the hill and expired. And he didn't find it till the next morning. But that highlining piece and those bells on collars, especially in areas where cougars are a problem, Umatilla National Forest, you got to have bells on your guys. So, but they know you're in that tent, and they're not going to go anywhere.
Kevin, is that a hand up?
It is. Curtis, you and I have had this conversation many times, but I'll start by saying, we wish everybody that ever hunted sheep or cared about sheep was a member of the Wild Sheep Foundation, but they're not. And so do you guys have a sense of how many pack goat users there are out there compared to how many are members of, you said 300, members or families nationwide, but are you guys able to say that you've got a third or half or 3/4 or 5% of the Packgoat users sort of in the fold under the Packgoat Association umbrella?
I'm gonna answer that question the best I can. So yes, we're currently sitting on about 300 members. We've had a little bit more than that in the past, and sometimes folks drop off and they don't renew their membership. When we say active members, I'm talking about people that have actively renewed their membership annually. And we've had as many as 4,000 different people come through NAPCA that maybe came and left, and they just didn't renew their memberships. Now, that number might be a little high. I do know that we've had up to 4,000 to 5,000 different followers that have followed us on our social media sites. And I talk about two different communities, the NAPCA community, those that are active members, and then the Packgoat community, those folks that actually own Packgoats, use Packgoats, and recreate with them, but they either have not joined NAPCA or they were in NAPCA at one time and just did not renew with us. I think that those numbers I'm going to guess somewhere to 4,000 or 5,000 different individuals throughout the Western United States. We have members in Kansas. We have members in back east. We have members in Alaska. We have members in Hawaii. We have members in Canada. So and then another question that might come up is, well, how many of those people are hunters and how many of those people might be using Packgoats in or near bighorn sheep habitat? I have a very, very small herd of bighorn sheep in my backyard, the Umatilla National Forest. There's some sheep over there. And I've seen them while I've been backpacking with my goats. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with us, and they took off the other direction when they saw us. They were trying to come down to drink. I was fishing the river. But I know this is long-winded, but I think that's probably less than 1/3 of our Packgoat community in general that actually uses Packgoats in what I would refer to as bighorn sheep habitat. And 99% of that is my hunting community. I have a lot of hunters going to the Packgoat. The deer and elk hunters, the bear hunters are just, yeah, they really like those Packgoats. So did that help?
Regina Bach has a relevant question in the chat here. She says, so these guidelines are not rules. So not everyone will be as good as you. Only 300 members versus goat packers. Are they members because they don't want to follow your rules? There appears to be a lot of discrepancies that you talked about where I don't understand. Can you comment on like that, the compliance piece to those guidelines?
I want to compare that with everybody that has a driver's license in their wallet. Most all of you do. And you get into your car and the state expects you to drive down the highway and follow the rules of the road. They expect you not to speed. Don't go through red lights. Don't drink and drive. Don't play with marijuana. Don't do these things that you shouldn't do to cause your car to collide with another vehicle. Dim your headlights when you're going down the freeway so somebody doesn't run off the road. We expect people to follow the rules of the road when we cut them loose every day. And that's in everything in life. We do have a set of guidelines that we've established, our best management practices. I nicknamed them the rules of the road because, well, I don't know, I just came up with that. Because it sounds neat, I guess. But those best management practices really do make for bulletproof goat packing. If you've got control of those animals, they're not going to have any contact with wildlife. They're just not. Are there going to be people out there that might go goat packing and might not follow the rules? I suppose that there probably would be. I can only add this piece of icing to the cake. Packgoat owners and users are homeowners. They own property. They have jobs. They work for a living. They've established an enormous amount of effort and time into training these animals to use them. These are good people. These are not criminals. These are not people that violate the law. They have an enormous respect for wildlife. Most of our members are members with different chapters of the sheep groups: Washington, Idaho, Oregon, Montana. I've got a lot of folks and our association has joined an established membership with the Wild Sheep Foundation because we want to be directly involved. So I in trying to answer your question, would some of these people not follow the rules? I suppose that's probably true in any topic that you could bring up. For the most part, I have met no resistance from our Packgoat community and have received nothing but praises for establishing these better policies to be safe and keep wildlife safe, and really to save goat packing on public lands because of some concerns. And if that didn't answer, I'll try to continue.
I'll just read aloud Regina's follow-up comment here. She says, driver's license comparison proves that we shouldn't allow goat packing near bighorn sheep. I don't know if anybody wants to, add to that or bring up another question. I really struggle with this compliance issue because if there's National Bighorn Sheep Center here, if there is a risk that could potentially hurt a wild sheep herd, I want to reduce that or mitigate that risk as much as possible. So here, Taffy has a comment here. NAPCA members are happy to take any interested person on a hike with our Packgoats or just introduce you to our Packgoats. The more you have firsthand knowledge of Packgoats, the more you will understand them. The more. So a question I have here, and I think this would be helpful for folks in the audience who aren't very familiar with Packgoats. So you mentioned the difference between Packgoats and like a 4-H domestic goat. Can you elaborate that on a bit more? And I'll pause. That's a question I have, but I see Perry Wolf with her hand up. So let's go to Perry.
Ann Hubbs from Alberta's had her hand up.
Oh, sorry, I haven't seen that. Should we go to Ann? Let's go to you first.
I can wait after Perry. Thanks, Kevin. I just
wanted to point out that you had your hand up, and when you're done, and go ahead, Sarah, with your question, and I'll follow up. It's more of a comment, so I'll follow up later.
Okay, well, thank you. Curtis, first of all, thanks for a really excellent presentation. And also I'd say
You're welcome.
Kudos to your organization as well for promoting the best practices in the education component as well. So my name's Ann Hubbs. I'm a wildlife manager actually here in Alberta with the Alberta government. And your reply to Kevin partially answered my question in terms of, I thought you had a presence here in Canada, but I believe on one of your slides, it showed that your 300 members were in the lower states in Alaska. So one question I have is, what is your membership like, for example, here in Alberta, and your level of collaboration with the Alberta and the BC goat associations?
It's pretty slim. I don't know personally the members that are in your area. I know we've had some members in the British Columbia region in the past.
Okay.
If I don't know if they're still members or not. I know that there are some folks up there that have been using Packgoats. They're extremely strict about taking Packgoats across the border, so you just can't do that. And in Alaska, they practically almost removed the goat from the entire state because they want them off the clean list. But we do have some members up there too. So, are those folks using those goats for hunting and recreating up there? I believe that's the primary purpose of their having them.
Is there an interest from your organization in potentially expanding your presence? And I'm thinking, for example, it would certainly be interesting to repeat that 2016 survey, or we're just beginning a voluntary testing program available to domestic sheep and goat producers in the province, and having your participation in promoting that or helping us encourage participation would be certainly informative. But I will probably follow up with a call with you as well. Absolutely. I don't want to monopolize time, but I do appreciate your presentation. And
the organization would welcome anyone in your region that wants to join the organization. We're here to disseminate information and ultimately to keep goat packing open to public lands. That's our goal. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So absolutely, we are all about. I'm all about additional research, looking into science that hasn't been looked into yet. And I still think there's so many things that we haven't discovered. I will tell you publicly, everyone on board here, I'm not convinced that Packgoats are dangerous to bighorn sheep. If they're not carrying anything, there's nothing that they can pass on. I've worked with these animals very closely. I've been very successful with them. I know that I have control over them. And I know that I will do this until I can no longer do it. And I'll never have contact with bighorn sheep. It's not that difficult to do. It's actually very easy. And that's what we're trying to train people and teach people to do. And we're making a lot of headway with that. We've been very successful.
Yeah, that's certainly a data gap for us is in
Yeah.
terms of those MOV prevalence levels in our
Yes.
domestics here. So that's why we're moving forward on that program. Thanks. Sorry, Perry and Sarah. I appreciate the time though.
Thank you for your question.
Sarah, do you want to go or do you want me to?
Will you please?
Okay, I just want Curtis, hi, for one. And great presentation. And I mean, I really love goats. They're very smart. They're great animals. Goat packing sounds like a lot of fun. And I think that, you know, if you look at it, what we're really struggling with is risk assessment of these animals in bighorn sheep habitat, and bighorns and goats are related. And we know that related animals can and do share similar diseases. And so I think something that we all learned over the past couple of years during the pandemic was that, you know, how you respond to a novel disease can be very, very different. And what may be harmful, not very harmful to a domestic goat or a domestic sheep can be, unfortunately, can be really devastating to a bighorn. And so, you know, really what the wildlife managers are trying to do, and the wildlife veterinarians, is struggle with risk management. And, you know, unfortunately, not everybody that's out with their goats packing, whether they're a hunter or a recreationist, are you or some of your devoted members, like Kathy, who I know, but I don't know many of the others, but I'm sure that there's plenty. And, you know, I've had conversations with some of my colleagues in other Western states that have said, you know, hey, we had a bunch of lost, you know, pack goats show up, and supposedly they were pack goats, but nobody ever really seemed to claim them. And I've also been promised many times that nothing will ever go wrong with the animal release I'm about to do. I just want to put these birds out and we're going to test this FLIR method, and there's no way they're going to escape. There's no way. We're going to clip their wings. They'll never be handled outside of the trailer. Nothing. Well, 48 hours later, the birds, the pheasants are missing on the landscape amongst endangered sage grouse. So, you know, we can never say never. So there is always a risk, and not everybody is you. And you're right, the fairs are a cesspool of pathogens. And that's up to the 4-H and the fairs to clean up and educate. I worry about your goat rendezvous because I don't know if everybody in your immediate circle cares for their goats to the same level that you do. We developed the list of pathogens that we felt that goats needed to be tested for, that were obviously had been transmitted to bighorn sheep, could have a possibility of it. Mycoplasma pneumoniae is one of them. You know, contagious eczema or sore mouth is another big one. The keratoconjunctivitis, some of the just regular pneumonias can be a big deal. The testing is expensive, and I get that it's hard to do, and really it ought to be done, you know, it has to be done every time you go out. You need to have a good veterinarian that you have a relationship with, that won't just sign the paperwork and not even put his or her hands on your goat. All of that is very expensive, and I understand that. But from the risk management side, I totally get where, you know, all the people on the wildlife side are coming from, and it doesn't matter how much you love bighorn sheep or wildlife. It's a risk. And if you could guarantee that everybody that set foot on the mountain, their goats had never been in contact with another goat, they'd just been on the farm, they'd had their veterinary stuff, they did all the testing like you did, they kept their goats with them, they had their gun to shoot the lions, all of that, then I think that, you know, the risk goes down. But the problem is that we can't trust everybody. And comparing it to driving, if the cops get you and you're breaking the law, then the consequences are really high. But if somebody takes their goats out in a substandard way and they're lost on the mountain, and they will find bighorns if they're there, because like attracts like, and if you can't be with the one you love, your owner, you're going to go to something that at least looks like you. You know, it's a leaves and sheep get sick. It can be a huge loss for bighorns. So it's a really fine balance, and I wish we knew all the testing, but I would love to see some way that people could, you know, that we could limit it. And you have to show your Packgoat, you know, association, you could get testing discounted, that type of thing. But the risk to precious number of bighorns and you know, at times just has to outweigh the ability to pack with your goats, go where you want to go with your goats. But I really applaud you for all the work that you've been doing and your best management practices and your focus on education. And I wish that every person that went out with a goat was like you.
Perry, thank you for that. Some of the key points that you brought up there, risk assessment. Risk assessment is a very interesting term. There hasn't been a risk assessment done on Packgoats. No one has done one. I'm not sure if anybody knows how to do one. What would a Packgoat risk assessment look like?
Yeah, you wouldn't do risk assessments usually. Well, first of all, you'd have to have some standardized stuff. But the other thing is risk assessments are usually done on the risk of disease or pathogen transfer. So you have to use the risk of it happening, what you know about the disease, the potential outcomes, and that type of thing. So, you know, there's specific ways to do a risk assessment, but I think it would be very difficult to try to do one, because, I mean, you could say, here's 10 pack goat owners that are all your friends. What is the risk if these are the rules that they follow? What is the risk there? But if you blanket it out to all pack goat owners, then it totally falls apart, because the level of contact can change. Does that make sense?
It does. And I guess Perry, the best answer that I can come back in reasonableness would look like this. If we have a goat that doesn't carry any of these pathogens or disease, if it's been tested and it's test negative, it's a test negative goat. I go back to the Besser study, 100 days in the paddock down at Pullman, Washington, and absolutely nothing happens. If I go into the woods with a test negative pack goat, even if I lose them and they do interact with bighorns, and the probability of that is very low. But even if it happened, if they made contact with them, is there really a risk if they're not carrying anything? Well, I think the Besser study pretty clearly shows that. I think the Silver Bell study kind of puts that in perspective. If this goat's not carrying something that it can spread to bighorn sheep, it could go up and have contact with them and get found 2 weeks later, and nothing will happen. Now that's a worst case scenario. I understand that. I know about the lost pack goat issues that you've spoke of. I have spoken with most of those people. Again, it's a small community. I talked with a gentleman in Spokane. I've talked with Larry Robinson. I've talked with some other folks that have temporarily lost pack goats that were gone for up to 2 weeks and then they got recovered. That doesn't happen very often. Can it happen? Can it happen? It's human to err. There's no such thing as zero risk, and you're absolutely right. I don't know that there'll ever be anything of zero risk. But I think the Packgoat community's done a pretty damn good job of getting that risk level down to about as close to zero as possible. And I'm very proud of the fact that they've done that and that they've taken that pretty seriously. Are there going to be folks out there that might go rogue and do their own thing? You know, we don't live in a perfect world. And I don't know what goat packing is going to look like 5, 10, 15, or 20 years from now. I know we've been doing this since 1972 and we've never had a collision with bighorn sheep. That's never taken place. So as much as I appreciate all of the concerns of biologists and the sheep groups, the best answer that I can give you is we're just trying to work as hard as we can to do this as responsibly as we can. And you're right. There are no 100% guarantees. So I don't know. I don't want to ramble on too long, but I go back to that healthy goat. If that goat is healthy, even if it gets lost, where's the risk? I'm waiting for a scientist or someone that knows more about this than me to tell me the answer to that. Where is the risk? I mean, if they're sleeping in a pen with each other for 100 days and nothing happens, maybe there isn't a risk. So anyway, feedback or next question, that's the best answer I can come up with.
So I've got a couple questions if you got time. First off, thank you. Appreciate everything you're doing. And I wish everyone that had pack goats did what you and your members do. And you're right, there would be minimal risk, but you represent a pretty small percentage of all of those out there. And as a biologist, I guess, yeah, put yourself in this scenario. When we go out and pick up hundreds of dead sheep and haul them off to the incinerary or to the dump, the impact of that on our minds is extremely strong. Imagine if you went out to your corrals and your goats were dead because they got a disease from bighorn sheep. You would really want to be minimizing the risk from our standpoint of letting sheep ever get close to your goats. So all of us love our animals. We love our wildlife. You love your goats. I love goats. I'm like Perry. I think they're the coolest thing in the world, even though I don't own one. But if I walked out and found my horses and mules dead, I would be pretty excited. And we, as wildlife people, walk out too many times and pick up hundreds of dead wild sheep. And you threw the figures of sheep up saying, wow, they've done really well. Well, you didn't throw the figure up of 1.5 million estimated to be here before man sort of showed up and we threw our interests and our wants and our needs on the landscape. So we're down to about 5%, between 3 and 5% of the number of wild sheep that we historically had, scattered over about 3% of the historical range. So that's where we're at. And we're never going to get back to what it was in the late 1800s. That's not our goal. We can't do that with us humans here wanting and needing everything else on the landscape. But we would certainly like to have robust, thrifty wildlife populations, particularly sheep in this case, out there. And I guess one thing I hear we all want to follow the best science. That's in your vision, mission statements, it's in ours. But, you know, realistically, there's going to be interpretations of the science. There are some people in, we'll call them camps right now, your camp, that interpret some of the research differently than some of the pathologists, veterinarians, and researchers in the bighorn sheep camp. If we're ever going to overcome that, I suggest we just take the money and try to get those people together and have them talk as adults and in reasonable ways. And we've been able to do that with especially you. And thank you, Curtis, for allowing this to happen. But how do we do that? And where do we find the money to do that? I think that's because my interpretation of, you know, a weather report might be way different than yours, because maybe I don't care if it's blizzarding and the wind's blowing, but you do. You want to stay home. So the way we interpret science can be very different. So let's try to get the people that are not necessarily on the same page, at least in the same room, and let's put money towards that. And then let's design some studies. I think the studies are very minimal on transfer of pathogens between wild sheep and goats, pack goats. So let's design a study that people on both sides of the fence could agree to and participate in. Maybe that's not possible, but that's what I strive for, is reaching across the aisle and getting other folks to talk and get together and develop something that we could all put our name on. And I guess, and one thing, you know, I reached out to you after you were here, Curtis. We brought you here and I was all excited. And then it wasn't long after you're here, I got a hold of a podcast with, I think it was your treasurer secretary at the time, and it basically called me a liar. It called Kevin Hurley a liar. It called Besser a liar. That was a terrible, terrible podcast put out by your officer in your organization, and we can't have that happen. It was totally inaccurate, and it's been taken down. I don't know why. Hopefully you guys took it down, because it was not accurate at all, full of misinformation, and we just can't have that happen, because I'll have to say, I was all ready to work with you guys until I listened to that, and I'm like, holy cow, if I'm gonna get that type of a stab in the back, I'm gonna be pretty cautious next time. And that's all I got to say. Thank you, Curtis, for stepping up and trying to get everybody in the same room that have different opinions. That's the only way we resolve things.
Thank you, Steve. If I was a businessman and I owned a business, and all of the facts and all of the data on planet Earth was given to me right in front of me, and someone asked me, I want you to do everything that you can do to keep bighorn sheep safe. You have an option. You can either remove all the wool sheep or you can remove all the goats. Which one would you remove first? Well, I think the very clear answer would be we'd remove the wool sheep, because it's the problem that's causing these sheep to die. I remember talking with the president of the Oregon Wild Sheep Foundation chapter one time on the phone, and he said it's just devastating to watch this herd grow for 10 years and then they just get wiped out. And I've asked that question so many times. Well, what was the disease that was causing that issue? And I hear the same thing. It was sheep pneumonia. They drown in their lungs. Kevin Hurley says it. They go looking for a place to die and they just die. I agree, and I had this conversation with Kevin at one time. I do agree that if we could get all of the right people into the same room at the same time, we could come up with some amazing stuff. I would like to see the Besser study done again. And instead of having him put them down, let's see what happens, because they were getting better before he put them down. I would like to see what would happen if we did some different experiments that would give us more information that would be very, very specific to pack goats. It costs what it cost, $100,000 to do that study. It's expensive to do that stuff. I get it. We have funds that we'd be more than happy to share with other agencies to do that kind of research, if we could get the right professors and the right researchers to do it. I think it would be fascinating to have a non-biased group of researchers go back and revisit some of these studies that have been done, and really pry and peel back the layers of some of these investigations, and just really look at them. And the Karen Rudolph study sticks out to me, just bling. It's like, well, gosh, did anybody ever think about calling down there to look and ask them if those nasal swabs from those two feral goats that were up on the hillside before Fish and Game went down there and spotted them and shot them, is that data still on file? And if it is, and those goats were test negative, if they didn't carry any Mycoplasma pneumoniae, well, then why did everybody point the sheep die off for the Hell's Canyon unit at those two feral goats? And then we find out that there actually was some loose wool sheep in the same area at the same time. What happened to that herd? Will we ever really know? I don't have those answers. I'm not a researcher. Steve, I'm going to publicly answer your other question. I did have a group of a young group of members. They were members. They were not officers of the organization, that visited with a gentleman and did a podcast. They did talk about Tom Besser's study, and they may have said some things in that podcast that they were not educated clearly enough about, and they may have said some things that were inaccurate, and they may have said some things that hurt feelings. I do know that I emailed you with that, and I apologized for them publicly, and I did try to correct that problem. But like any organization, I cannot police all of the people inside of it, and I can't fire them. They don't work for me. You know, we're going to run into stuff like that, and I hope that I can fix that, or help you get past that with my group. I will be ending my term as president here within the next month. I don't know who's going to take over. I've been in this position for 6 years, and I cannot serve as the president any longer because they won't allow me to continue. I would like to circle back as a board member and stay close to NABCA and get involved in this. I think that it's very important, and I'm very passionate about it. I don't want it to go away. I absolutely agree with you that some of the things that we've done, just for example, that the working group seminar that we did for 2 days with the Wild Sheep Foundation, I felt like we made leaps and bounds in that meeting. And Perry was there, and we had some gentlemen. I wish I had the list in front of me because I just can't remember everybody's name, but Kevin was there. We had some folks from Arizona Fish and Game. Tim Schomer was there. We had a really good group of people. If we could get all of the folks that actually know what they're talking about in the same room for 1 week or even 3 days and dissect this information and do some additional studies, I think we could make leaps and bounds of getting answers and really settle once and for all. Is this goat really a threat to bighorn sheep? Even, folks, even when Tom even when he put the goat strain on those goats that were in the pen with the sheep, they lived in there for another 100 days before he put them down. I'm not a scientist, but it doesn't look like those goat strains. And he says it publicly that he's only found 3 different types of goat strains. If those goat strains are not harming sheep, or if they are, what does that look like? They were in there for 100 days and they started to get coughing and they got a little sick. Well, then they started getting better. Well, then he put them down because he says I needed to do a gross examination of the lung tissue on those animals. And he did. And then, I don't want to go any further, but there was some disputes about what his colleagues saw on those slides. But at any rate, yes, I think more needs to be done. I think it's doable. It doesn't have to be that expensive. And I think the more people that get involved in it, American Goat Federation, the Packgoat Organization, the different sheep working groups from different states, we could do that study again. We just got to find a researcher to do it.
Sarah, Kevin, and Perry have their hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say what Curtis and Steve are talking about is in August, I think it was August of 2016 or 2018, we had a 2-day gather in Spokane, and we had 6 of our folks. 4 of them are here tonight. So me, Steve, Dr. Wolf, Dr. Besser. Tom's been on this, watching this as well.
Good.
Mike Cox from Nevada and Tim Schomer. So those were the folks that sat down, and we did have a candid conversation, and we did gain some ground. So I just wanted to clarify that for the audience.
Perry, you're on mute.
Curtis, I took a little offense that you said that you wanted to get some unbiased researchers to redo that study, and the accusing Tom Besser, Francis Kassir, any of the people in Wattle that have done incredible work on trying to unravel the causes of bighorn sheep pneumonia complex throughout the West. That's a real slap in the face to them and to me too, because we've all across the West, every veterinarian in the West has worked hard to solve this issue. And so the work can be done, but also you have to remember that studies don't go on forever unless there's billions of dollars. And if the goat folks want to raise billions of dollars to keep sheep around forever, then that's fine. And that might be something that can happen. But, all research projects have a beginning and an end. So just because it doesn't come out exactly the way you want it to come out, doesn't necessarily mean that it could have been extended or that anything was done incorrectly. So I think that let's not make this into a conspiracy theory type of thing about goats. I don't think anybody is trying to achieve zero risk. It is impossible to do that. I think the main thing is that probably your goats and other people's on this call's goats. They're tested regularly, kept separated, go through quarantine, that type of thing, just like we've all been doing, pose a very low risk. But the problem is that we cannot, manipulate everybody. And the consequences, as Steve has pointed out, for bighorn sheep are very high. So working together to find areas where it's safe for pack goats to go and where there's a low incidence of bighorn sheep wandering in, is the best that we can do right now. There's always more science to learn. We'll never learn it all. But I think that what was worked out in the Shoshone was a pretty good start. It would be great if we could figure out a way to get the testing cost to something more reasonable. But that is probably not going to happen because that's just the way veterinary medical care goes. But I think that was a great meeting that we had. I think we got a lot done. And I do agree we need to do more of those. But, let's not start a huge, gigantic study that may end up with meaning nothing. I think we need to look at what's reasonable and maintain separation where we can, but let's do it in a reasonable way that works for as many people as possible.
Perry, I appreciate everything you've said. If I've said something that made you feel like I've accused our researchers of something that is off base, please tell me what that is. I don't want to open up a can of worms here, but I have the highest regard and respect for all of the researchers. I've talked with most of them on the phone, and I've met some of them in person.
No, you just said if we can find some unbiased researchers, which implied that the research that's already been done was done by biased researchers. So if I took your meaning out of context, I apologize.
Terry, if that came across that way, I apologize. That is not where I was going with that. If we did a study, if we did another study on any topic with sheep or goats, in all logic, if the funding is coming from different groups, we don't want anything to be lopsided. What we want is we just want to know what the facts are. I'm not a researcher, so when I want to know what the facts are, I have to just go and ask people that know more about it than I do. I have to read a lot of information and I have to ask questions. I've asked Tom questions. I've asked, I've spoke with Karen Rudolph. I've spoke with Bill Ferret. I've spoke with these folks, and I had to get these questions answered because I didn't understand it. But as the more I research, the more I understand. So I hope that clarified that.
Yeah, and that's what we're all trying to figure out is the answers to all these questions. And it is, it's a very complicated and everyone's trying to do their best. I think Steve has a comment.
Just real quickly, Curtis, you mentioned the one permit and trip into the Shoshone. Thanks for testing the waters there. I know they're always, the first time out, the car doesn't run as smooth as you'd like it to. It sounded like it went pretty darn well to me. And you talked about $400 to bring in, I believe it was 4 goats. Yeah, that would make me blink. If there was a way that you knew some of your members were going to come this way and visit the Shoshone in those areas where you need a permit. And if we knew of the costs ahead of time, I'm not speaking for, but I would think that the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation might be interested in showing that there's a partnership here. And if it costs $400, they may pay for half of it. But they would have, they have application periods for funding requests basically in May and October, November, so fall and spring. So you kind of have to get it in, and they don't like to do emergency requests. And Mike's phone's on. You might mute that, please, Mike. Anyway, just a thought: if you know someone that's coming your way, especially one of your members that's doing things right, and we got an example that we can put out there, talk about, write up in our different publications about how we use this system and how it worked and how we could make it better. That's the direction we'd like to go. But I think there might be funding there. I don't know how the board would view it. I'm not on the board anymore, and I'm not the ED. So.
Thank you, Steve. So Dave Swiss, he pulled 4 goats for the nasal swabs. He actually took 10 goats into the Shoshone because he had enough people to go with him to do that, where they had 3 goats per person. And that's where that came up. If I was a financial guy and I had an organization, and thank you for that, for offering up that scholarship information, that I just think that'd be a valuable partnership. But if I thought, I may only get 2 or 3 applications every year from a goat packer that might want to go into the Shoshone and do that Wind River trip and fish those chain lakes, that's $800 or $1,200 a year, and that sounds like a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's really not. And if the goat packer paid half of that, and if there was funds in some kind of a scholarship fund to benefit bighorn sheep that could help pay for some of those things, I think that'd be money well worth spent, because they're not going to issue a permit unless those goats come back negative, and that's what we all want in the first place. And I'm hoping that answers a lot of the concerned questions that Perry brought up. Well, we want as close to zero as we can get, and I believe we're obtaining that by testing those goats before we go in. So, what'll that look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? I don't know, but thank you for that, because I do think that type of partnership could be very, very valuable. It helps everybody feel like they're involved. And let's face it, it helps people sleep at night.
Well, if you hear of someone coming this way, have them contact me. Kevin's connected with everyone. Contact Kevin, whatever. But if we can anticipate it ahead of time, there might be a possibility to split some costs. And I think that's where I'd like to see not only our partnership go, but this whole world go is, hey, we had an issue that we had litigation over, for crying out loud. And now we're both paying to allow for responsible recreation with pack goats in a bighorn sheep area after we've had litigation. I mean, let's show that we can get along.
I agree, Steve. I do.
Wow. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you, everybody who attended this call this evening. Kevin, Perry, Glenn from the Wild Sheep Foundation. I love where we started, where we ended. Something I say a lot: conservation is collaboration. And to echo our board president who typed in the chat, just sharing what she said, Curtis, thank you for your passion and your thoughtful presentation. She wishes all backcountry users were as conscientious as you. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think this course was extremely helpful. I will make your contact information available on our website and to our constituents, and this recording will be available online. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Kevin has a hand up, sir.
Oh, sorry, I'm not seeing these.
Yeah, just like I said in the introduction, I mean, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but it's an important one. So Curtis, thank you for stepping up and presenting your guys' perspective, and appreciate your willingness to do that. And Sarah, thanks for the forum to have this conversation.
Our pleasure. Okay.
All right. Thanks
Great.
all.
Thanks,
We're done.
Sarah. Thank you all. Nice to see you.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy
Appreciate it.
holidays.
Thank you, guys. That was great.
Thank you, Carolyn.